Okay, so at the time of this recording, there are a lot of very real reasons to be stressed, anxious, afraid, or outraged. I want to acknowledge that up front and clarify that the lesson I want to teach today is not meant at all to dismiss or understate these very real threats in the world today. However, if you're finding yourself responding to this stress, anxiety, fear, or outrage in unproductive or inappropriate ways, say you're ruminating about things you can't control or taking your fear or anger out on people that you love, then this lesson may be for you. In general terms, today's lesson, called the Resilience ABCs, is meant to be used anytime you catch yourself responding to a situation poorly, or if you notice a pattern of behavior where you tend to respond to situations in a certain way that isn't helpful. And that's the key. The Resilience ABCs are about building the self-awareness to be able to regulate our responses to things, which we would want to do if they are ineffective or inappropriate. But if you are responding to a situation appropriately and effectively, and there are absolutely appropriate times to be outraged and effective ways to channel that energy, then just sit back, relax, and enjoy this video for what it may be able to teach you about how to help others, or how it may help you in more precedented times. Roll the intro. Hello and welcome back to Black, White, Gray, Yellow. My name is Diana, and this channel is all about communication, connection, and resilience. As a quick background on me, I'm a Master Resilience Trainer in the United States Army National Guard. I also served 13 months as the State Resilience Coordinator at my state's Joint Force Headquarters. This series is based on the research behind the skills taught as part of that program, replacing proprietary material with references to open source research and books, so you can share these videos freely. If you want to see more, be sure to like and subscribe. Today I'm going to start talking about a resilience skill that serves as the basis for many others, which is one reason it's called Learning Your Resilience ABCs. Of the 6 things resilient people have, this skill builds self-awareness. In The Resilience Factor by Drs. Karen Rivich and Andrew Chate, the authors argue that you have to know yourself first, then change. That's why skills in self-awareness have to come before skills in mental agility or self-regulation. Even when we discussed goal setting earlier, a self-regulation skill, we first had to do some introspection to discover our own values before we could set effective goals. The Resilience ABCs will require some more introspection, but we'll go step by step through how to apply this skill to build self-awareness, which will then set us up to self-regulate and be mentally agile. So, what are the Resilience ABCs? The idea is that our emotional, physiological, and behavioral reactions are not the direct result of things around us outside our control, but instead the result of what those things mean to us, how we perceive them, how our brains interpret those things, or our thoughts about them. I'll say that again. The idea is that in the face of some trigger, say an adversity, A, our emotional, physiological, and behavioral responses, the consequences, C, are not the direct result of the trigger itself, no matter how much it can seem that way. It seems like I'm sad because he broke up with me. I'm angry because she moved my things. I'm happy because it's a sunny day. I hit him because he hit me first. I yelled at her because she broke my toy. My heart raced because I won the lottery. I'm avoiding examples in the news right now, but I think you get the picture. But no matter how logical this seems, it isn't true. Rather than the thing itself, it's what that thing means to us that drives our emotional, physiological, and behavioral responses. Those consequences, C, are the direct result of how our brains perceive or interpret those things, our beliefs, B, or thoughts about the trigger, not the trigger or adversity itself. Some people find this idea infuriating, particularly when we try to apply this to adversities, because it requires us to look inward in a situation where we so very much want to blame others. Therefore, I want to start off by saying the goal here is not to excuse the behavior of others. I'll say that again too. The goal here is not to excuse the behavior of others. Our thoughts or beliefs about someone else's behavior may be that what they did was unfair, uncouth, unsportsmanlike, unpatriotic, or just wrong. And that may be true. But we also don't want to be leaves in the wind in a constant state of reacting to things we can't control. Recognizing the role our thoughts or beliefs play in the process, that they are the intermediate between some adversity or other trigger and our consequences, our emotional, physiological, and behavioral reactions, allows us to take back control of ourselves and our lives. And that's the goal. I also want to say again that the ABC model is most useful when our emotional, physiological, and behavioral consequences are either ineffective or inappropriate. The ABC model empowers us to change those consequences to be more helpful ones once we understand what beliefs are driving them. I am not in any way suggesting that you should use the ABC model to take responsibility in a situation when your consequences are both justified and effective. Again, the goal is to take back control of ourselves and our lives so that we are taking the most effective, purposeful action we can. Maybe you're asking, how can this be true? Perhaps one way I can prove to you that our consequences, C, are driven by our beliefs, B, not the adversity, A, or any other trigger itself, is to offer the simple thought experiment of how different people respond to the exact same person, place, event, or idea if they have different beliefs or perceptions of that person, place, event, or idea. Each of us essentially sees the world through a filter, which is made up of, or at least built by, all of our past experiences, which is unique to all of us. So any two people can see or experience or think about the exact same thing and have completely different perceptions, thoughts, or beliefs about that thing, and therefore have equally wide-ranging responses. Take anything or anyone controversial as an example. But for the sake of keeping our emotions in check and our mindsets open to learning, I'll walk through a much simpler example. Imagine someone taking forever to place their order in front of you in line at a restaurant. If you think that the person is wasting your time, you're likely to get angry. You may clench your fists and feel your blood pressure start to rise and want to yell at the person to hurry up. If, instead, you think that the person, who may or may not be disabled in some way, is just giving you more time to look at the menu and isn't worth your energy to be mad about, you're likely to be a lot more patient. You may still be slightly irritated, or not, but the irritation doesn't rise to the level of rage. Same situation, same A, different thoughts or beliefs, different outcome or consequences. And yes, especially when we get into the more complicated examples, the same A may drive many different, potentially even conflicting beliefs. Each one of those will drive their own emotional, physiological, and behavioral consequences. It can be a mess to tangle out individual thoughts, but understanding that the thoughts are there is the first step to learning to regulate them. One of the reasons this is one of my favorite skills is because it is so universal. The fundamentals of the idea can be traced back to various ancient philosophers, including the Stoics like Marcus Aurelius. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. Early Greek philosophers like Cicero, Seneca, and Epictetus. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take on them. And early Asian philosophers like the Buddha. All experiences are preceded by mind, having mind as their master, created by mind. Even Shakespeare quoted this idea in his day in the words of Hamlet. There's nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. For more about the philosophical underpinnings of this idea, check out this book, The Philosophy of Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, CBT, Stoic Philosophy as Rational and Cognitive Psychotherapy by Donald Robertson. We'll talk more about CBT in a minute. Several of these early writers influenced the work of Dr. Albert Ellis, the late psychologist and psychotherapist of Columbia University. He developed the earliest version of the ABC model in his theory that became known as Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, or REBT. In Dr. Ellis's model, the ABC stands for adversity, beliefs about adversity, and emotional consequences. Looks familiar. In modern versions of this model, including what the Master Resilience Training Program uses, the consequences includes physiology and behavior as well as emotion, and the A can be any activating event, good or bad. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that the A can be anything about which you can have a thought or an opinion: person, place, event, or idea. However, for the purpose of a conversation about resilience, our primary focus will be on the A's that are adversities. REBT is today considered a form of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is fundamentally all about the relationships between our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. CBT was pioneered by Dr. Aaron Beck, who spent his career at the University of Pennsylvania and later founded the Beck Institute for Cognitive Behavior Therapy in Philadelphia with his daughter. CBT is used today by a range of professionals from clinical to sports psychologists. Clinical psychologists use it to treat everything from addiction and substance abuse to depression and anxiety, and even more severe mental disorders like bipolar disorder and even schizophrenia. Sports psychologists use it just as well to help maximize human performance in athletics and other competitive events. So it's very powerful, and the ABC model we're learning today is at its heart. Just for reference, the book that introduced me to CBT was this book, The Confidence Gap by Russ Harris. I've referenced it before, and I would absolutely go so far as to say it changed my life. So how do we do it? How do we leverage the ABC model to build resilience? In the resilience factor, Drs. Rivich and Chate recommend starting with an adversity, A, that particularly pushes your buttons. Some event, situation, person, or topic of conversation that you know you don't handle well and that you wish you handled better. In order to separate this adversity from our beliefs about it, try to pinpoint just the who, what, when, and where. Don't worry, there will be plenty of time for those beliefs and emotions, but in order to be resilient, it is important that we're able to disentangle them from each other. Then, even though we know our beliefs, B, come next, we tend to be consciously aware of the consequences, C, next. So the next step in using the ABC model for self-awareness and resilience is to clarify the C. Identify what emotions that adversity evokes, what physiological responses our body is having, and what behaviors we either are or are inclined to perform. This will require some introspection, and you aren't likely to be good at it right away, especially if you're really angry or upset. It may be best to do this as a reflection, in hindsight, thinking back on something that you know triggers strong emotions rather than trying to do the reflection in the moment, at least at first. If you do find yourself trying this when you are especially angry or upset, it would be a good time to do some deliberate breathing. Even just 1 to 3 deep belly breaths can do a lot to undo the physiological effects of stress, including helping to improve your focus and awareness. It can do a lot to calm your mind and bring you back from that strong emotion toward thoughtful rationality. With practice, you will get better at naming your emotions, identifying your physiological responses, and recognizing unhelpful behaviors. This is the first part of building self-awareness. Once you've identified your consequences, the third step is then to think back through that event, situation, or conversation as if in slow motion and try to identify exactly what raw thoughts or beliefs led to those consequences. When I say exactly, I mean you want the raw, unedited, uncensored version of your thoughts or beliefs. The Master Resilience Training Program calls these heat-of-the-moment thoughts, while Drs. Rivich and Chate call them ticker tape thoughts. But by either name, the idea is the same. He's a f***ing idiot. Who the hell does she think she is? Maybe I'm a f***ing idiot, or I'll never make friends and I'm going to die alone. The goal isn't to judge, critique, or change these thoughts yet. First, we just want to build the self-awareness. Drs. Rivich and Chate write, ticker tape beliefs are the thoughts that run through your mind, sometimes outside your awareness, that determine how you feel and what you decide to do in the midst of adversity, challenge, or a new experience. Your ticker tape beliefs place you squarely on an emotional and behavioral trajectory that will either facilitate your ability to handle the situation or cause you to stumble and falter. In other words, they directly affect the emotions you feel and the actions you take in response to adversity. There is a trick we can use to help us identify our beliefs from known consequences, or even predict our consequences from known beliefs. It involves what are called thought themes and BC connections. They are part of Albert Ellis's ABC model and rational emotive behavior therapy, REBT. The idea is that while your exact ticker tape thoughts may be unique, many similar thoughts or beliefs, B, can be grouped into thought themes. Themes like trespass, this person has violated my rights. Loss, something valuable to me is gone. Or positive future, things are going to be okay. Then, by apparent universal law of human psychology, which Ellis termed BC connections, it turns out that certain thought themes evoke particular families of emotions and their associated physiological responses and behaviors. So we can use these BC connections to tease out what thoughts or beliefs drove the consequences we experienced. For time's sake, here's just a quick overview of each thought theme and BC connection. Write me in the comments if you'd like another video going more in depth into each one. Trespass. When we feel our rights have been violated or we've been treated unfairly, even by inanimate objects or circumstances, we'll feel angry and respond with aggression. Inflicting harm. In contrast, if we feel we violated someone else's rights, or if we think we've caused inappropriate, unnecessary, or unintentional harm to someone or something else, or even think about doing so, we feel guilt and want to apologize. Loss. When we perceive that something we value, tangible like a thing or person, or intangible like an opportunity or self-esteem, is lost to us, we feel sad and either physically or emotionally withdraw. Gratitude. In contrast, when we receive something of value, tangible or intangible, we are grateful and feel an urge to either give back or pay it forward. Negative comparison. Thinking that we are unworthy or that we don't measure up, even to our own standards, leads to embarrassment and wanting to hide, which could mean physical avoidance, emotional withdrawal, dropping from a competition, or withdrawing an application. Positive contribution. In contrast, when we believe we have added value or contributed in some way, our response is pride and wanting to share that achievement or contribution, or plan future ones. Danger. When we feel under threat, which can include if something is unknown or unclear, we feel anxious, agitated, or fearful. Fear in particular makes us want to do nothing. Positive future. In contrast, when we genuinely believe that there are things to look forward to in our future, we experience hope, and we typically find it energizing. We are more likely to take positive action when we feel hopeful. There's a book, Broadcasting Happiness, The Science of Igniting and Sustaining Positive Change by Michelle Gielan, which talks about some of the science behind how fear and anxiety help keep us locked up while hope and other positive emotions empower us to act. It's an excellent read if you want to learn more about this topic and how it can apply to our news cycle. Okay, for what I hope is an easy example, let's take you watching this video right now as our A. It may or may not be an adversity for you, but suppose it is. Are you feeling angry? This would indicate thoughts in the theme of trespass. So perhaps you're thinking, who does she think she is trying to tell me how I think? She doesn't know me. I'll be damned if I believe that my thoughts are what make me angry. She's making me angry. She's disrupting my peace. These would be thoughts of trespass, and it would make sense that you'd be angry. Or maybe you feel uncomfortable, even embarrassed. This would suggest your thoughts might be in the theme of negative comparison. Maybe you're thinking, oh shit, I've been blaming other people for my moods for a long time, and now I feel like an asshole. Or maybe you're finding this video really empowering. Your thought theme might be positive future, and maybe you're thinking, wow, this is exactly what I've been looking for. This is really helpful. I'm going to use this to take back some control when I face adversity. So pause the video and see if you can apply the ABC model to how you're feeling right now. Or apply it to another example that's more relevant to you, and feel free to tell me in the comments. So, Step 1 was to isolate the who, what, when, and where to describe the adversity, devoid of any emotion or thoughts about it. Step 2 was to articulate the emotions, physiological responses, and impulses for behavior you experience. We were on step 3, which was to think back through the conversation as if in slow motion to tease out the exact ticker tape, uncensored thoughts or beliefs that drove the consequences you experienced, using BC connections and thought themes as a guide. Once you've done all this, step 4 is to ask yourself if those beliefs, now in your awareness, are helpful or hurtful. Most likely, since we started with an adversity that you know you don't handle well, and therefore the consequences probably weren't what you wanted them to be, the beliefs you untangled that drove those consequences probably aren't especially helpful. So now, with this newfound self-awareness, you can choose what you want to do about it. Before we get to that, the other main way to use the ABC model is to look for patterns in our thought themes. There's nothing inherently wrong with feeling angry if you believe you've been trespassed against, or feeling sad or even depressed if you lose something dear to you. But what if you're finding yourself angry or depressed or even prideful all the time? Or more frequently than you want to, or than people around you want you to. The ABC model can help us identify patterns in our thoughts or beliefs that are driving those emotions or other unhelpful consequences, and again, we can then start to challenge the unhelpful beliefs so that we can do something about them. Using the ABC model for self-awareness is great, but there has to be a purpose to it. The purpose, as I've just alluded to, is to identify unhelpful thoughts or thinking patterns, which we can then do something about. A lot of what we do after identifying unhelpful thoughts or thinking patterns fall into other skills which we will talk about in future videos. I told you at the beginning, this skill is the basis for many others. But to leave you feeling empowered, let's go over the skill which Ellis taught as part of his ABC model. Ellis's ABC model is sometimes called the ABCDEF model, because after gaining self-awareness with the ABC, Ellis teaches us to use self-regulation for positive change with the DEF, which stands for disputations to challenge beliefs about adversity, effective new rational beliefs, and new feelings. In other words, once you've identified an unhelpful thought or belief, you can challenge that thought or belief and replace it with a more helpful one that drives different, more helpful consequences. The Master Resilience Training Program recommends first identifying what consequences you want to have, then to choose a thought or belief that will drive those consequences. If this is easier for you than challenging the beliefs first, then do that. The MRT program calls this technique shift your thinking. How do you know if a belief is unhelpful? Well, again, it might be driving unhelpful consequences, so maybe you find you need to shift your thinking to get different consequences. But another way you might be able to tell is to question the ticker tape thought itself. A lot of times the exact thought drives our consequences without being in our conscious awareness, but once we tease it out, we might find that the actual thought is ridiculous. For example, if you find yourself getting overly upset anytime someone corrects you and you tease out that the actual thought driving that response is, "This just proves I'm a f***ing idiot," you can then turn to yourself and say, "That's ridiculous. No, I'm not." Knowing that your first reaction is to beat yourself up anytime you're corrected, you can then consciously replace that thought the next time you face that adversity. In that particular case, you can use the one thing, one time method, telling yourself, "I'm not an idiot, I just did this one thing wrong this one time, and now that I've been corrected, I can learn to do it right." So let's go through a real-world example. My husband used to get angry anytime he drove anywhere, especially when he lived out near LA. The adversity was the other drivers on the road. His belief at the time was that the drivers were actively malicious, trying to run him off the road and prevent him from changing lanes. He felt trespassed against, so his consequences were intense anger. You might even call it rage, and a lot of physiological stress. It undermined his resilience, as was evident in the fact that he couldn't handle other adversities well after driving anywhere. The littlest thing could set him off. Maybe this sounds familiar to you. I taught him a phrase I heard some years ago. Do not attribute to maliciousness what can be explained with stupidity. In other words, don't assume the other drivers are out to drive you off the road if their behavior can be explained by sheer ignorance, which is far more likely. He laughed, humor also relieves stress, and started to think of other drivers this way. Now, he still gets frustrated with traffic, but the intensity of his anger has subsided greatly now that his thoughts about the other drivers have changed. He still feels stressed because he sometimes thinks he's in danger from some of these other drivers, and feeling in danger itself is a trigger because he thinks he shouldn't have to feel that way. But now he only feels trespassed against by the system that allows such drivers to exist, and it's a lot harder to be so intensely angry towards something so nebulous. Perhaps something like this can work for you too. The other things I sometimes tell my husband is that we never know what's going on inside another vehicle or what kind of day that driver had. Maybe they're going slowly because they have something fragile in the back seat. Maybe they're on the phone because they're experiencing some kind of emergency. If they run a red light, well, that's not okay, and we're not excusing that behavior, but most likely there's something going on, and it isn't something that they're doing just because they don't care. Extending this kind of grace can all but eliminate the negative emotions, except perhaps in the case of the person running the red light. Here's another alternative thought or belief I sometimes hear, and which my husband sometimes reminds me of. Is this going to matter in 5 years? For things you aren't likely to remember even happened 5 weeks from now, let alone 5 years, you can think to yourself, it isn't worth my energy to get mad over this. Of course, I tried using this one recently and came to the conclusion that yes, some of the things I'm stressed about today are absolutely going to matter in 5 years. If that's the case for your stress too, then just don't use this thought. It isn't effective in this case. Maybe focus on the serenity prayer and controlling the controllables instead. I'll give you one more phrase you can use, whether in traffic or facing most any other adversity, to use as your effective new rational belief E, which is to ask, is there an opportunity to grow from this? Short of some situations that put you in real danger, most adversities come with the built-in benefit of an opportunity to grow and learn from the experience. And remember, that's part of resilience too. If you're able to focus on how you will be able to look back on this experience later as an obstacle that helped you grow, then again, the intensity of your negative emotions about the adversity may subside. In light of some of the adversity in the news today, which does put a lot of people in danger, there's a fight to be had. And first we have to win that fight. But maybe a thought about how we might come back from this trial stronger than we were before, which is a thought in the theme of positive future, can give you the energy necessary to take purposeful action. Or not. If that doesn't give you hope, then don't worry about it. Focus on the thoughts that drive your effective, purposeful action. In the next several videos, we'll go over other skills that leverage the ABC model, so I hope I explained this well. Please write me in the comments if you have any questions so that I know what kind of videos to put out in the future that might help. If you are struggling with what's going on in the news today, please consider reaching out to loved ones or professional resources that can help. Another way you can help me out is to post links in the comments to local or national organizations that can help, and I'll add them to a list I'll start in the description. And if you're worried that you or someone you know is thinking about suicide, please remember the mental health crisis line, 988. And that's going to be it for this video. If you found it helpful, please leave a like. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe. Until next time, my name is Diana, and this has been Black, White, Gray, Yellow.